Welcome to our podcast. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. Today we are joined by Lisa Tressida from Truro-based company Kensa Utilities. Thank you for joining us, Lisa. Should we just start by, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Kensa Utilities?
So I'm Director of Business Development in Kensa Utilities, and that's part of the Kensa Group. We're a UK-based manufacturer, installer and funder of low-carbon heating systems.
Okay, so there's Kensa Utilities, Kensa Contracting and Kensa Heat Pumps, is that right?
Yes.
And that's all part of the Kensa Group?
Exactly.
Okay, and who owns the Kensa Group? Is that...
So it's owned by our shareholders, which are a mix of the original founders of the company, some of the directors, and we also have investors in Legal & General and Octopus Energy.
Okay, Octopus Energy, interesting. They're pretty big, aren't they?
They're huge.
Okay,
yes.
yeah. And tell us a bit about what does your role include day to day? What does it entail?
My role is a mix of sales and innovation. So I focus mainly on product development that helps us sell more heat pumps. So things, ways to package up our product to make it easier for people to say yes.
Yeah.
So currently, ground source heat pumps are very expensive.
Yeah.
And so we need different ways to fund that and to finance it so that it's easier for people to accept them.
Yeah, yeah. And what were you doing beforehand? What's your background?
I've had a massive mix of jobs. I've worked for Cornwall Council. I worked for West of England Aerospace Forum for a bit. I've got lots of experience in the public sector and with grant funding.
Okay, brilliant. And you mentioned about costs of heat pumps and being expensive. Could you tell us a little bit about the technology, about how ground source heat pumps work, and why that matters?
Okay, so usually in the UK we talk about heat pumps. What people tend to mean when they say that is an air source heat pump. The technology itself is a compressor that moves heat from one thing to another. So everybody already has a heat pump in their house. It's your fridge. That takes heat from the food and pumps it out into the kitchen. It's exactly the same technology that we can scale up and use to heat a whole house.
Okay.
So for an air source heat pump, the source of renewable energy is the air. Yeah. And for ground source, we can use water or the solar energy that's stored underground.
Okay. So I assume you access that by digging down and. Yeah, how does that installation and how does that work?
There's quite a lot of ways of accessing heat.
Okay.
So you can have a water source heat pump where you're drawing water into the system, extracting the heat and pumping the water back out.
Okay.
You can have a closed loop system where you have water circulating in plastic pipe that you throw into another source of water. So our factory is heated by mine water. Yeah. There's a loop of plastic pipe thrown down into the mine.
Interesting.
It gathers heat and circulates that across a heat exchange plate inside the heat pump.
Yeah.
Our most common way of doing it is with vertical boreholes.
Sure.
So we bring in a drill rig, drill down anywhere between 80 and 300 metres deep.
Yes. Yeah.
We put a pipe down into that's a loop, so it's like a U-shaped pipe. Yeah. Circulate fluid around it, and it picks up heat through the ground.
Yes.
And it's not geothermal heat; it's solar energy. So throughout the year, the heat in the ground is replenished by the sun, and through water moving through the earth. Okay. It's not geothermal; is where heat's coming up from the ground. Okay. You've got to get really deep to access that.
Interesting. And then does that mean in the summer when it's hot, can you put energy back down? Does it work like that as well?
It can, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it will be replenished anyway, but you can speed that process up by introducing waste heat. Okay. One example of that would be solar panels on a roof perform best within a certain kind of temperature boundary. Yeah. You can cool solar panels with fluid and put that waste heat down into the ground, and it means that the cost of the infrastructure is lower and the efficiency of the heat pump is higher.
Okay.
So with a heat pump, it's very important what your source of energy is.
Yeah.
Because if it's cold, so if you've got an air source heat pump and it's the middle of winter, the source of the energy is very cold. It could be 0 degrees outside or 5 degrees, or even less in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
So it needs more. The heat pump will need more electricity to get a usable heat to use around your house to heat your house up. If you use the ground, and in Cornwall we're quite lucky being on a big lump of granite, which is slightly warmer. The ground temperature across the year will be about 12 to 14 degrees Celsius here. Yeah. So our heat pump has less work to do to get that temperature up. So if you can add more heat through waste heat, then again your heat pump will be doing even less work.
Interesting. And can these be installed in any home or any commercial property, or is there kind of specification as to where suits heat pumps best?
Any home can be heated with a heat pump.
Okay.
If you can heat a house now on gas or oil or LPG, whatever it is that you've got, you can carry on heating it with a heat pump. Okay. Just kind of swap it out and make some changes to the heating system. If it's wasting lots of heat now, it'll carry on wasting lots of heat with a heat pump.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about the installation costs of this.
The cost of retrofitting a house with a heat pump, so let's say a 3-bedroom house, is probably somewhere round about £20,000, maybe more. It depends how much work you've got to do, how much heat's being lost in the building. There's quite a range of pricing. But the infrastructure that you install, so the plastic pipes that are collecting heat for you, are going to be there for 100 years. Okay. So it's that is a really long-term investment. Yeah. What we are doing now is splitting out that cost from day one. So that represents a third or more of your installation cost. Okay. So we split that out from the day one upfront cost, and we treat it as a utility. Okay. Instead.
So then people are paying for access of it more than just the installation costs and their ownership of it.
Exactly that. Yeah. So they're using it for the time that they. So they're paying for it for the time that they're using it. Yes. So no one's going to be using it for 100 years because they're not going to live that long. Yeah. Yeah. So for a lot of people, for a lot of homeowners, they'll be looking at 7 to 10 years in a house. That's average in the UK. So it doesn't make sense to them in planning ahead to be paying for something that will be in that house for 100 years. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And do people need outdoor space to install this? Does a garden help? I've seen from certain installations, or can it be done in blocks of flats? Or yeah. So the traditional way to do it would probably be as your friend has done, which is likely horizontal trenching. Yeah. Where you lay out your pipes. That's the cheapest way to install your ground array heat collector. Okay. Where there's less space, you can do a vertical borehole. Yes. And that works in much more areas. Not many people have the land to do a horizontal array. We do that on most large-scale projects. We do vertical boreholes. And in one project, we've actually done that in the public highway. So where there is no garden, where there's no green space, you can actually go into the road. Okay, interesting. And then people are paying for access of it, just like the gas network currently. Yes. Interesting. So that must pose some quite large challenges when trying to scale up. How does that work? What's that look like for you guys? Well, it's a way for us to access a large part of the retrofit market in the UK. Okay. So if anyone here is familiar with heat pumps, they've probably heard of Octopus's offer of a free heat pump. Yeah. That doesn't work for people that live in an apartment. Okay. Or for people that would require planning permission to install it. Okay. So anyone with a narrow building where that air source heat pump would be close to their neighbour wouldn't be able to get it. Sure. Our solution allows you to decarbonise heating in areas that are not suitable for air source heat pumps. So the kind of medium to high density urban areas where people can't decarbonise individually, and they need an organisational approach to decarbonisation of heat.
Interesting. Okay, and what's the vision for Kensa Utilities moving forward? Where and for you as part of Kensa?
What we're aiming for is a way to decarbonise the majority of the UK housing stock. So we want to make it possible for everybody to have a heat pump. At the moment, we think that that's too difficult and too expensive, and our vision of the future is that there'll be pipes underground, that people can connect to them when they want to install a heat pump, that they'd be able to do that when their boiler breaks.
Yes.
At the moment, if you wanted to get a heat pump, it would probably take you 3 to 6 months to get that done.
Yes.
So if your boiler's broken, you're going to get another gas boiler.
Yeah.
We want a future where it's normal to have a heat pump instead of gas.
Interesting. Okay, brilliant. And can you tell us a little bit about the Heat the Streets project you've been doing recently?
So we started Heat the Streets around about 3 years ago, the planning of that. And Heat the Streets was primarily an innovation project for us to test the business model that sits behind the Kensa vision of networked heat pumps. So this was our first demonstration of installing the ground array infrastructure as a utility. And that was important because we needed grant funding to reduce the risk to the business of trialling this, and to reduce the cost to consumers, so that the cost barrier to them was less, and it was therefore easier for them to sign up to our long-term contracts that make our business model work.
And so did that involve then putting a network of heat pumps throughout? Where was it focused? What was
we actually worked across 5 sites in Cornwall. Our grant funding was limited to Cornwall. 3 of those were new build developments where we installed the ground array before the properties were built, and those are shared ground arrays, so they're linked within the development but not to each of the other sites. So you can have a ground array that serves one property or 50, and it's entirely flexible within that. Before we finished Heat the Streets, our offer for new build, as with the funded array, became commercially viable. So even whilst we were still in delivery, we were then selling that solution on the open market, and we had 2 competitors enter the market with us.
Brilliant.
So the pace of it was just immense. The focus for our retrofit, which is different because it's way more expensive per property and then therefore harder to sell, was in a village called Stithians, where we worked on social housing retrofit and private retrofit. And it matters, the distinction between the different markets, because the market drivers and the package and the budget availability between those different markets varies massively. And in Stithians, we installed the ground array in people's gardens in some instances while we waited for planning permission, and then in the public highway in others.
And because there's so many different ways of installing it, in a project like this, does this make it quite challenging to do en masse if you're taking a village or a town and you want to bring ground source heat pumps?
Not really, no. It opens up further opportunities for you. So with our technology, it is a local solution, so it tends to be a community-based project because you want to work with properties that are next to each other. But you can then also look at what assets you have around you. Is there water nearby that would be an easy source of heat? Is there a supermarket where you could collect waste heat from their refrigerators? And you could bring that in and reduce the cost of the project and make it easier for people to pay back.
And how many of you are there working within Kensa to do these projects?
There are over 200 employees in the company,
Okay.
in the whole of the Kensa group. In my bit of the company, we have 4 employees.
Okay,
So
brilliant.
we're quite small and new.
And with this Heat the Streets project, you mentioned it being grant funding. So is that from the government and the EU? Where's that source?
That was European Regional Development Fund.
Okay.
We initially applied for about £14 million for them for a
Okay.
village-wide heat network in Portleven.
Yeah.
And they turned that down because there was quite a high perceived risk there to them that they would invest loads of money in a single project that may or may not complete, and
Yeah.
they don't want to do that. They
For
want,
sure.
they want the
Yeah.
investment to have meaning. So they actually invited us to reapply for a smaller project during COVID when I was on maternity leave,
Okay.
and so we kind of pulled together this Stithians project
Yes.
really quickly at that point.
Yeah. So you've been there since the start. As it grows, do you see your role changing much, or how does that look?
Yeah, so I would say I still do a lot on product development, and when I say that, I mean financial products. This
Yeah.
is not, I'm not making any
Yeah,
new
sure.
heat pumps or anything.
Yeah.
But it's more and more about sales.
Okay.
So as those products mature, you have to spend a lot more time getting out there and pushing them and promoting them,
Yeah.
and so it kind of
Yeah.
the role evolves into a sales role.
So what's your kind of average day, average week look like then, with like in terms of your work?
I do a lot on working out the economics of a project, trying to understand if it's viable.
Yeah.
Looking at various funding streams for that. So it's never usually a flat. We ask the customer for cash, and for the kind of projects that I look at. We can bring in private finance. We can do that over a 40-year term. We might add a maintenance contract to that. We might bring in grant funding. So I'm looking at the entire economic
Sure.
proposal for a project, pitching that back to the potential client.
Yeah.
Yesterday we had a meeting with one of the UK's largest housing associations, and it presented all of our various levels of finance packages to them. I'll also do data analysis, so I can download all of the EPC data for an area, put that through a calculator that spits out what a project might look in that area. And then also so tomorrow I'm off to the Heat Pump Ready conference, where I'll be up on stage speaking to people about what.
Brilliant. Amazing. And what's that? Is that where's that based? Is that in Cornwall?
That's in London.
Okay.
Central London.
And it's all the big heat pump brands coming together, and how's it work?
It's so the Heat Pump Ready programme is a government-funded programme to accelerate the deployment of heat pumps at scale in private retrofit. And there are several projects going forwards just now that are demonstrating the applicability of their solution in a given area. Because we have fairly recently finished the same kind of project, I've been asked to come along and talk about how we achieved that to try and support these other projects.
Amazing. That sounds incredible. And so your unique selling point then is it essentially trying to make, and your focus trying to make heat pumps as accessible to people and homes as possible? Is that the kind of key area of focus, particularly with kind of large installation costs, etc.?
I would say our unique offer is to do with what we call networked heat pumps.
Okay.
So this is the idea that you have shared infrastructure in the ground that can access all of those different heat opportunities. And that reduces the electrical demand from the heat pump, which makes it cheaper for the UK to decarbonise heating.
Brilliant.
So what I've not mentioned is that in order for the UK to achieve net zero, we would have to invest hundreds of billions of pounds in our energy networks to make that happen.
Yeah.
The less demand on the grid at peak, the less investment is required as a country.
Okay.
And so our solution provides the lowest cost way for the UK to decarbonise heating.
Okay.
And that's our kind of unique selling point with this technology. And what I do is just try to nudge us that bit further all the time to get to scale.
And presumably you're working quite closely with the government in this. What's the relationship with them like? We've got a senior leadership team that are quite active, looking for opportunities to promote what we do and try and make it easier for us to navigate the policy landscape. Okay. So policy changes very fast. Yeah. Well, it doesn't actually change that fast. It changes very regularly. Yeah. And in the kind of business that we're in, you have to be fairly agile in how you're positioning yourself and selling things, and to keep up with those potential changes. So we speak to government a lot, and we have a dedicated advocacy team that responds to government consultations, has meetings with members of parliament. We have to be very active, especially as we are a small part of the energy sector in the UK, and we are currently fairly underrepresented, which means we have to be louder, because there's not very many of us. Yeah, because they've obviously got a big plan, or that's what it doesn't always look like that, but to decarbonise, and ground source heat pumps part of this, nuclear's part of this. Is that then why you've got to kind of shout a bit louder about it? And do you have many other competitors in the market who are kind of running the race with you? What's that look like? So the issue that we have is short-termism. Okay. The infrastructure we install will be there for 100 years, and the economic impact of what we do will have the biggest impact at scale, but that's over a longer term. Yeah. And the main competition we have is with air source, which is better if you're looking at a 7 to 15 year term. Yeah. And so the governments tend to work on the election cycle. Yeah. So short-termism is a problem in pushing forward our solution that will have the best impact for generations in the UK. Yes. So we struggle a bit with that. Yeah, for sure. Our competitors are air source, district heat networks to a degree, which you're probably better looking up than me bothering to explain it. And we do have some competitors in the market now. So in new build, where it's cheap and easy to install the infrastructure before a house is built, we have at least 2 other direct competitors in the market offering the same technology as us. Brilliant. In retrofit, we have a competitor joining the market in the near future. Yeah. And we might work with these competitors going forwards to promote our cause and to accelerate the together. Amazing. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you mentioned government short-termism. Is that a kind of threat this year with a general election coming up? A kind of potential change of party? What? Yeah. I think it depends how you look at it and how you view things. I think we're seeing it as an opportunity. Yeah. Because politicians tend to start kind of scrabbling around, thinking how they can do better, how they can get good stories out, how they can get buy-in, and that tends to be an opportunity to put your story across. Yeah, for sure. And how you mentioned putting that story across in terms of your marketing and reaching the average person on the street. How do you do that to them?
that we can talk as much as we
Yeah.
like about how we could do things and what the Kensa
Sure.
vision is,
Yeah.
but until you demonstrate it
Yeah.
and you get that idea out there and you show people that it can
Yeah.
actually work and that it's possible, desirable and
Yeah.
achievable,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean very much. So that project was at its core marketing.
Okay.
And then we used every channel that you can think of beyond
Sure.
that. We're on Facebook,
Yeah.
LinkedIn. We do loads with industry magazines and
Yeah.
trade shows. I'm at 2 different trade shows next month.
Brilliant.
So there's constant promotional activity.
Yeah, amazing. And you mentioned, just talking about sustainability a bit, you mentioned this is kind of crucial for the decarbonisation of the UK. How can it be made more sustainable from your perspective? Are there key areas where you're like, we need to work on that or this area of focus? Or?
The single biggest thing that could change right now would be the price of electricity.
Okay.
That would have the highest impact.
Yeah.
It's all well and good saying, you should do it because it's the right thing.
Sure.
But until we make it financially attractive, it's
Okay.
not going to happen at scale.
Yeah.
There are lots of other things that we do, including improvements in the heat pumps themselves to make them more efficient.
Yeah.
We're also looking at different coolants in the heat pumps to make them more environmentally friendly. We do a lot of that ongoing improvement, but those improvements are incremental.
Sure.
Whereas something like rebalancing gas and electricity prices could have a large and immediate impact on the market.
Interesting. Yeah. And in terms of maintenance of this system, once it's set up, what's that look like?
It's almost nothing.
Okay.
Which is why we've got investment from Legal and General and Octopus,
Yeah.
because this is a stable, low-risk asset
Yeah.
that they can put pension funds into that's going to give them repayment over a long term, which is what they're looking for.
Okay.
Our investors also have high environmental and sustainability goals, so
Yeah.
it ticks all of those boxes as well.
Yeah.
But I think it costs us something like £30 per property per year to maintain the asset, which is very, very low.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. And are the investors quite hands-on with the day-to-day kind of movement forward of things and operations?
The way that we have been invested in, Legal and General and Octopus do not have a controlling share in the
Yeah.
company, and that allows us to maintain our SME status, which is important
Okay.
when you're in growth and you want to retain control and you want to be able to carry on accessing grants.
Yeah.
They are supportive though, so that they support us to make contacts with people that are useful and to improve the way that we do business in general. So more like mentoring than directing, I would say.
Brilliant. Interesting. And what does success then for you as a business look like in both the kind of the short and the long term?
So success for us will probably look something like 10,000 heat pumps a year in the
Okay.
short term.
Okay.
So at the moment we have a factory in Cornwall. We
Yeah.
manufacture all of our heat pumps there. I think we've got about 3,500 a year
Okay.
right now. In the near future we'll be
Yeah.
reaching something like 10,000.
And would that be to go all throughout the UK or mainly just in Cornwall?
We do work across the whole of the UK.
Yeah.
So we've got guys up in Scotland. We've got projects in Scotland. Had some discussions with Northern Ireland. We are based down here, and we like to work down
For sure.
here. But
Yeah.
we sell across the whole of the UK.
Okay. Interesting. And so I assume there's lots of others doing it across the UK as well, or are you quite distinct in
We're
that?
the UK's only manufacturer of ground source heat pumps.
Okay. Wow.
Just now.
Interesting. Amazing. I guess that puts you in quite a good position then.
I don't know. So we've got around, I think we hold about 50% of the market for ground source heat pumps in the
Yeah.
UK. So we are the market lead.
Okay.
There are quite cheap heat pumps being brought in from Japan.
Okay.
I believe the majority of the air source heat pumps in the UK are
Oh, really?
from Japan.
Yeah.
But not that I'm particularly up to date
Sure.
on that, but it can be cheaper to manufacture outside of the UK.
Okay.
So there is still quite a bit of competition in that
Yeah.
market.
Yeah. But presumably it's great for Cornwall if you're doing this here, you know.
Yeah, we're quite a big employer locally.
Brilliant.
Mm.
Interesting. That's great. And what do you perceive as the kind of are there any key threats? You mentioned short-termism. Any other kind of key threats to your business that you perceive?
I think we're at a bit of a critical stage in the heat pump market, particularly for mass private retrofit. So this is a future market for Kensa, is
Okay.
mass private retrofit. And for an idea of the scale, last year there were 70,000 heat pumps installed in the UK.
Yeah.
There are 1.2 million gas boilers. So the heating market is very big.
Yeah.
But we're actually at a fairly critical point of being relevant in the mass private retrofit market. If we don't refine our offer to make it affordable in the fairly near future, we might miss that boat.
Yeah.
So we are doing quite a lot of work, and that's one of the big things behind Heat the Streets is to create an offer that's affordable for average people.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, Lisa, thank you very much for joining us today. Are there any final closing thoughts you have that you'd like to share about your work or Kensa?
I would just say I absolutely love working for the company. It's one of those places you can go where you can try new things and be yourself, which is just great. So it's worth keeping an eye out for vacancies when they come up.
Brilliant. And do you have any open at the moment?
I think we've got about 3 right now. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. 3. So if you're listening to this, search Kensa Group or Kensa Utilities and have a look. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening.